Have you ever noticed that some of the kindest people you've ever met are also some of the most tired people? Not just the physical tiredness from a long day, but a deep, soul-level weariness. They are the ones who always show up, who always smile, who always say yes when you ask for help. But if you look closely enough, past the reassuring grin and the easy agreement, you can see the exhaustion flickering in their eyes. You can sense that somewhere behind that unwavering kindness is something deeper, something heavier, maybe even something darker. We often imagine kindness as this pure, uncomplicated good. We tell children to be kind. We admire kindness in leaders. We measure our own humanity by how much compassion we can extend. But kindness, like everything else in this complicated world, has a shadow. And when you ignore that shadow, when you pretend it doesn't exist, kindness itself can turn into something destructive. Have you ever considered that the good child might just be the most frightened one? It starts not as a choice, but as a strategy for survival. A child learns with the sharp intuition of the young that being kind, being agreeable, earns them love. When they put their own needs aside, the need to cry, to be messy, to be demanding, to make a parent more comfortable, they are rewarded with smiles, praise, maybe even the affection they weren't receiving otherwise. Over time, this association isn't just a memory. It buries itself deep inside their nervous system. Kindness becomes synonymous with safety. And the older they get, the harder it becomes to separate who they are from what others expect them to be. They become the reliable one, the good person, the friend who never complains, the partner who never makes waves. But here's the painful truth no one tells them. When kindness is forced, when it is driven by a fear of rejection or a desperate, clawing need to be valued, it's no longer pure kindness. It becomes a mask. And masks, when worn too long, start to suffocate the person beneath them, until they forget what their own face even feels like. Do you know what it costs to be the person everyone relies on? Think about the people in your life who are endlessly kind. They'll listen to your problems for hours, absorbing your emotional turmoil like a sponge. They'll show up on a Saturday to help you move, their own to-do list forgotten. They'll lend money they can't afford to spare. They'll sacrifice their own rest, their own peace, just to make sure you're okay. At first, it feels admirable, even saintly. We put these people on pedestals. But if you've ever been that person, if you've lived that role, you know the ugly, unspoken truth. Behind every act of self-sacrifice is a quiet, simmering resentment. A voice that whispers, "What about me? Who is coming to help me move?" But that voice is quickly silenced, battened down under a mountain of guilt, because this type of kindness, this chronic kindness, comes with an unspoken, ironclad rule. You are not allowed to put yourself first. What if the very thing we praise is slowly killing the people we admire? Psychologists have studied this phenomenon, and it has a name: compassion fatigue. It describes what happens when someone gives so much of their empathy, so much of their emotional care, that they eventually run dry, becoming a hollowed-out shell. Healthcare workers experience it, teachers experience it, even parents experience it. But it's not only about caregiving professions. Everyday people, those who identify as kind souls, are at immense risk too. Studies show that people who consistently prioritize others over themselves report higher levels of anxiety, depression, and even physical health problems like chronic fatigue and a weakened immune system, compared to those who maintain balance. Kindness, when unchecked, becomes self-erasure. And that's the dark side we refuse to see. Kindness without boundaries is not kindness at all. It becomes a subtle, socially approved form of self-destruction. It's like watering every plant in the garden except your own roots. Eventually, the gardener collapses from thirst, and the entire garden withers with them. But what if your kindness is secretly teaching people to ignore you? Here's the more unsettling part. Sometimes, kindness itself becomes a weapon. And I don't mean in the obvious, manipulative way, like someone pretending to be nice to get something. I mean the quieter, more unconscious way it shapes your entire social world. When you are known as the kind one, people start to expect it. They rely on it. They shape their own behavior and expectations around your endless generosity. And without anyone realizing it, Your kindness teaches others a dangerous lesson, that your needs are secondary, that your feelings are negotiable, that your time is a free commodity. Over time, people stop even asking what you want because they assume you'll always adjust, always accommodate, always say yes. The kind person ends up with the best of intentions, training the world to overlook them. This creates a devastating paradox. The kinder you are, the more invisible you become. And invisibility is not peace. It's a profound loneliness dressed up in politeness. So is kindness a force for good or a ticking time bomb? Now, none of this means that kindness is bad. Far from it. Genuine kindness is one of the most beautiful connective forces in the world. But there's a fundamental, life-altering difference between kindness that flows from abundance and kindness that bleeds from emptiness. One heals both the giver and receiver, the other corrodes the soul. One comes from a place of love and connection, the other from a deep-seated fear of abandonment and unworthiness. What does the science say about the price of being nice? Let's look at the cold, hard facts. In a study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, researchers found that people who struggle to say no, often those who identify as kind and agreeable, are significantly more likely to experience burnout and feel that their lives are controlled by the demands of others. Another study out of UC Berkeley showed that altruistic behavior increases well-being, but only when it is voluntary and authentic. When kindness is performed out of guilt, obligation, or a deep-seated fear of disappointing others, it has the opposite effect, actually lowering happiness and increasing stress hormones like cortisol. Why can't you stop, even when you know it's hurting you? And yet, knowing all this, so many of us remain trapped in this cycle. We don't want to see that flicker of disappointment in a friend's eyes, so we say yes. We don't want to be perceived as selfish or difficult, so we keep giving. We don't want to risk losing love, so we keep sacrificing. But the cumulative cost of this endless kindness is enormous. Slowly, insidiously, you begin to lose sight of yourself, your own desires, your own preferences. Your own inner voice become a distant murmur. You don't even know what you want anymore because your entire identity has been built around anticipating and serving the needs of others. You become a stranger in your own skin, a ghost in the machine of your own life. What happens to all the feelings you refuse to feel? And here in the silence is where the monster within begins to stir. Because when you consistently suppress your own needs, when you deny your righteous anger, when you bury your boundaries in the name of being kind, those emotions don't just vanish. They don't have anywhere to go. So they collect in the shadows of your psyche. They ferment in the dark, and eventually they will come out in ways you can't control or even recognize. Maybe it's snapping at your partner for leaving a dish in the sink. Maybe it's a passive-aggressive comment that slips out during a meeting. Maybe it's a resentment that leaks out in subtle, cutting ways. Or maybe it's even darker, years of repressed feelings exploding all at once in a torrent of rage, leaving you and everyone around you shocked at the person you've become. We like to imagine that kindness protects us from our own darkness. But in reality, kindness without honesty creates the perfect breeding ground for it. Because every time you say yes when you mean no, every time you smile when you want to cry, every time you hold back your truth to make someone else comfortable, you are not being kind. You are abandoning yourself. And self-abandonment, like any abandonment, always has consequences. Is your goodness just a conditioned response from childhood? Now let's be brutally real. Why do we do this? Why do kind people struggle so profoundly with the simple act of drawing a line? The answer often lies not in our hearts, but in our conditioning. From a young age, many of us are subtly and not so subtly taught that kindness equals worthiness. That being agreeable is safer than being authentic. That love is not a birthright, but a currency earned by what we give, not by who we are. Children who grow up in environments where love is conditional, where affection depends on performance, obedience, or self-sacrifice, internalize this belief and carry it into adulthood like a heavy, invisible backpack. They become adults who confuse people-pleasing with kindness, self-erasure with virtue. But true kindness does not erase the self. True kindness includes the self. If your kindness is costing you your mental health, your joy, your energy, then it's not kindness anymore. It's self-neglect dressed in the costume of virtue. Is your brain actually wired for this kind of endless giving? This is where the neuroscience gets fascinating. Our brains have something called the mirror neuron system. It's what allows us to feel empathy. When you see someone in pain, your brain circuitry lights up as if you are in pain too. That's why compassion feels so natural to us as humans. We are literally wired to connect and care. But here's the critical catch the self-help books don't mention. Mirror neurons don't distinguish between healthy empathy and destructive, boundaryless empathy. If you constantly expose yourself to the suffering of others without any filters or limits, your brain essentially floods itself with stress signals. Over time, this leads to a state of chronic stress, immune system issues, and profound emotional exhaustion. In other words, your brain is not built for endless, boundaryless kindness. It's built for balanced, sustainable connection. So is the monster within actually you. So the dark side of kindness is not that kindness itself is bad. It's that kindness can be twisted by fear, by conditioning, by culture, by our own unhealed wounds, into something that looks noble on the surface but slowly, methodically, eats us alive from the inside. And when that happens, the very thing we thought was our greatest strength becomes the very chain that binds us and the weight that breaks us. If this resonates, what does that mean about you? Now let's pause and reflect here. If you've ever felt this, the bone-deep exhaustion, the simmering resentment, the eerie sense of being invisible even though everyone around you calls you so kind, please hear this. You are not alone. You are not broken. You are not defective. What you're experiencing is the natural, predictable consequence of a world that praises the mask but doesn't teach us how to care for the face beneath it. It's the monster within, not because you're a bad person, but because unexpressed truths and unhonored needs eventually demand to be seen and heard, one way or another. How do we break the cycle without becoming cold and selfish? This brings us to the most important question. How do we embrace the radiant power of kindness without letting it destroy us? How do we stay compassionate and open-hearted without slowly turning into martyrs? How do we love others deeply without abandoning ourselves in the process? What if the kindest thing you can do is put yourself first? So how do we do it? How do we transform kindness from a source of depletion into a source of strength? The answer lies in one simple but profoundly uncomfortable truth. Kindness must begin with you. Not in a selfish, disregard for others kind of way, but in the foundational sense that if your kindness does not include yourself, then it isn't truly kindness at all. It's a performance. And every performance, no matter how acclaimed, must eventually end. Have you ever resisted the most basic instruction for survival? Think of it like this. If you've ever flown on an airplane, you know the safety instructions by heart. In an emergency, you are told to put your own oxygen mask on first before assisting others. At first glance, that advice can feel almost morally wrong, especially if you're a parent or a caregiver. Why would I not help my child first? But the logic is irrefutable. If you pass out from lack of oxygen, you become helpless, a liability. You can't save anyone. The same principle applies to kindness with ruthless accuracy. If you neglect your own needs, your own rest, your own well-being, your ability to truly, sustainably care for others will eventually suffocate and die. Could saying no be the ultimate act of compassion? This is where boundaries enter the picture. And for many kind people, the word boundary feels terrifying. It sounds like rejection. It feels like selfishness. It looks like building a wall. But in reality, boundaries are the purest form of honesty you can offer. A boundary says, this is what I can give and this is what I cannot. My resources are finite and I respect them. It says, my love for you is real, but it cannot exist if I am empty. It says, I care enough about our relationship to show you my limits, because without them, my care will inevitably rot into resentment. Psychologists describe boundaries as the invisible lines that define where you end and where another person begins. Without those lines, relationships blur into codependency, manipulation, or silent suffering. With them, relationships become clear, mutual, and grounded in genuine respect. In fact, research shows that people who set healthy boundaries often experience deeper, more meaningful connections because their yes comes from a place of free choice, not fearful compulsion. Would you trust someone who never says no? And here's a counterintuitive fact. People who respect their own boundaries are actually seen as more trustworthy and reliable. Why? Because when they say yes, you know they mean it. There's no hidden resentment, no silent tally of sacrifices. Their kindness isn't forced or extracted, it's authentic. And authenticity is magnetic. What are you willing to lose to find yourself? But let's be clear. Setting boundaries isn't just about saying no to others. It's about saying a resounding yes to yourself. And that can feel deeply uncomfortable, even shameful if you've spent your whole life equating your worth with your selflessness. It can feel like you're betraying the very identity that people have always admired you for. You might even lose relationships in the process. Some people, accustomed to your endless giving, won't like it when you stop. Some will push back, accuse you of changing, of being selfish, and may even withdraw from you. And that is genuinely painful. But it is also necessary because any relationship that can only survive when you are overextending yourself was never truly balanced or loving in the first place. When does helping actually become harming? Now, let's dig a little deeper into the psychology. There's a concept known as pathological altruism. It describes what happens when the desire to help others actually causes harm, either to the giver or to the receiver. For example, when someone sacrifices their own physical or mental health to care for others, or when constant rescuing prevents the other person from ever developing the resilience and skills to solve their own problems. Pathological altruism looks from the outside like saintly kindness, but it creates a toxic cycle of dependency, guilt, and exhaustion. It is, quite literally, kindness that has gone morally and psychologically wrong. Have you been tricked by the good person myth? This ties into something even bigger, the cultural myth of the good person. Many societies idealize kindness as the highest virtue, but often in a way that subtly encourages self-erasure. Think about the phrases we use. She's such a good girl, she never causes trouble. Or, he's such a nice guy, he'd give you the shirt off his back. Hidden in these compliments is a dangerous, unspoken assumption that goodness means never making demands, never saying no, never disrupting the peace, never taking up space. But real goodness, real strength of character is not about erasing yourself. It's about showing up as your full, authentic, sometimes messy self and still choosing compassion. When kindness comes from that place of authenticity, it liberates everyone involved. When it comes from fear, it enslaves. What does the first step out of this cage look like? So what can you do, practically, to shift from enslaved kindness to liberated kindness? Here are some strategies, not as quick fixes, but as lifelong practices in reclaiming your soul. First, practice the pause. When someone asks something of you, break the automatic reflex. Don't immediately say yes. Take a breath, a full, deep one. Give yourself the space of a few heartbeats to check in with your own body and needs. Ask yourself, do I have the energy for this? Do I genuinely want to do this? Is this request aligned with my values or just their convenience? Even a 10-second pause can be enough to interrupt the cycle of people-pleasing and allow a more honest answer to emerge. Second, learn the power of the gentle no. A no doesn't have to be harsh, cold, or confrontational. It can be compassionate and firm. Try, I care about you, but I can't take this on right now. Or, I'd love to help, but that doesn't work for me. Or simply, I'm not available for that. The world will not fall apart if you say no. In fact, the more honest you are, the more weight your yes will carry. Third, reframe your worth. Your value is not a transaction. It is not determined by how much you give, how many problems you solve, or how many people you make happy. Your value is intrinsic. It was there before anyone needed you, before you learned to perform kindness to survive. You are worthy of love, respect, and care even when you say no, even when you rest, even when you take nothing on your shoulders but your own well-being. Fourth, tend to your own garden. You cannot pour from an empty cup. Make it a non-negotiable priority to fill yourself with things that truly nourish you, genuine friendships that are a two-way street, creative pursuits that make you lose track of time, moments of pure stillness where you demand nothing of yourself. When you live from a place of abundance rather than scarcity, kindness flows naturally. It's not forced. It's not depleting. It becomes a gift you are happy to give, not a transaction meant to buy love. And fifth, make peace with your shadow. Allow yourself to feel the harder, unacceptable emotions. Anger, frustration, sadness. These are not the enemies of kindness. They are its essential guardians. They are internal signals, your psyche's alarm system, telling you when your boundaries are being crossed, when your needs are being ignored. If you suppress them, they will fester and morph into the monster within. But if you acknowledge them with curiosity, if you listen to what they're trying to tell you, they become your most trusted guides, pointing you unerringly toward a life of balance and integrity. What happens when you finally take off the mask? Let's return to the metaphor of masks. For many people, kindness has become a lifelong mask, the smile you wear to cover the exhaustion, the yes you give to avoid conflict, the generosity you perform to prove your worth. But masks are heavy, and the longer you wear them, the harder it becomes to remember what your own face looks like. The real journey is not to throw away kindness, but to finally, courageously, remove the mask and let kindness come from the real you. The you that can say yes and no with equal honesty. The you that is kind without disappearing. Who are you when no one is watching? There is an old, profound saying. If you want to know who you truly are, look at how you treat yourself when no one is watching. That is the bedrock of authentic kindness. It doesn't begin with the approval of others or the praise of being the nice one. It begins in the quiet, private choices you make for your own well-being. Do you rest when you're tired? Do you forgive yourself when you fail? Do you speak to yourself with the same compassion you so freely offer others? If not, then your kindness to the world is built on a fragile, crumbling foundation. What is the ultimate form of kindness? The beautiful, liberating irony is this. When you treat yourself with true, unwavering kindness, your kindness toward others becomes more powerful, not less. It becomes more resilient, more impactful, because it now comes from overflow, not depletion. It inspires others rather than exhausts them. It invites them to rise with you into their own power, instead of training them to lean on you endlessly. And maybe that's the final, transformative lesson here. The dark side of kindness isn't about rejecting kindness. It's about evolving it. It's about transforming it from a mask you wear into a mirror that reflects your true worth, from a desperate compulsion into a conscious choice, from a strategy for survival into an expression of genuine love. So the next time someone tells you, "You're so kind," pause for a moment. Let the compliment land and then ask yourself the most important question. Is this kindness coming from fear or from freedom, from exhaustion or from abundance, from the mask or from the real me? The answer to that question will tell you more about yourself, your strength, and your path forward than any external praise ever could. Because at the end of the day, the monster within kind people is not their anger, it is not their limits, it is not their boundaries. The real monster is self-neglect. And once you face it, once you courageously set down the heavy mask, you'll discover a miraculous thing. Your kindness doesn't disappear. It only grows stronger, sharper, more radiant, and more sustainable. It becomes the kind of kindness that doesn't just keep others alive, but keeps you alive too. And maybe that's the ultimate kindness, to live fully, completely, and unapologetically as yourself, without erasing, without performing, without begging for love. To show the world, by your own vibrant example, that true compassion doesn't mean self-erasure. It means courage, it means balance, it means truth. And that is the kind of kindness the world needs most. Not endless yesies, not silent suffering, but the profound courage to love without losing yourself.